Hey friends, I am just enjoying my last day in Albuquerque. We are about to take off on a holiday trip to Michigan, which is going to be lovely. Annalise is over the moon. I'm also quite excited, if I can allow myself to admit that. It'll just be nice to be in a new place for a little while and in the water. I love where I live, but the desert is a dry place. Who knew? So it's going to be really nice to just kind of breathe in another part of the country for a little while. And I have my post has nothing to do with that. I've had some. We watched the final episode of Brené Brown's mini-series Atlas of the Heart yesterday, and she really nailed it in that last episode. There's some really cool ideas in there. I mean, it was, in some ways, I found that fifth episode by far the most sort of useful and the most it was just really insightful, really profound. If you've heard me speak about the other episodes, it's not a slight against them. They were all amazing, but this one really gave me some concepts that I think I'm going to be carrying with me for a while. And one of them was the concept of story stewardship. And this came out of, basically the whole episode was devoted to empathy, compassion, and the foundation for meaningful relationship, or the connections that provide the foundation for a meaningful relationship was like the subtitle. And so it was a lot about, emotions and practices that help us connect with other people. And story stewardship is, she described it as the process of really deeply listening to someone else's story. And she says in the first episode, I found it really interesting, she says something about how she actually thinks it's impossible to walk in someone else's shoes. She thinks that the attempt to do that is actually a kind of misconception of what's really happening. What we can do, we can never really understand what it's like to be someone else. But what we can do is be curious. We can listen when they speak, and we can believe them that their experience is as they describe it, which seems sort of almost like obvious, but actually if you think about how quickly we try to take someone else's words or someone else's story and convert it into terms that we understand, or convert it into the model that via which we see the world. I mean, that's an almost automatic process in most of us, that we instantly translate someone else's experiences into a version of our own experiences so that we can make sense of them. I don't believe there's like a malicious intent or a kind of, or even an egotistical sort of self-centered thing that we do, but the effect is to insulate us from their experience because we're quickly reframing it in terms of our own experience. And so this idea of story stewardship is really based on that principle of listening when someone else tells us their story and believing them. Believing them. Actually taking seriously what they are recounting to us. And then there was another interesting aspect of story stewardship, which had to do with the way we share our own story. And this is where I was like, oh wow, this actually, some insights showed up for me in my history. I started looking at my own habits here and my own history here, because what she said was story stewardship is both honoring someone else's, other people's stories when and as we are in the position to receive them, and not sharing our own story with people who haven't earned the right to hear it. And when she said that, I was like, whoa, I wasn't expecting, that's not what I was expecting her to say. And it sort of like, because one of the things that was under discussion throughout the whole episode was about boundaries and healthy boundaries. And in their research, they've discovered that the people with the strongest boundaries are the people who are able to display the most empathy. The most empathy and the most compassion comes from the people who have the strongest boundaries. And that really struck me, because then she went on to describe, she said, well, how empathetic can you be to someone with whom you're enmeshed, where you can't tell where they end and you begin, or someone who's trampling your boundaries, someone who's violating your boundaries, how much in genuine empathy can you be? And I thought, wow, I would never have, I don't know that I might have thought of it that way. I don't know that I would have thought of it that way and formulated it quite so firmly, but it was really, in some ways, it was, revealing and also kind of inspiring to hear that and to realize, oh wow, yeah, when I let my boundaries be violated, whether it's my boundaries of what someone says to me, the way, talking to me in a way I want to be talked to or don't want to be talked to or whatever, physical boundaries. I don't often deal with physical boundaries being violated. I would imagine that women probably deal with that a lot more. But even like, in my life, one of the boundaries that, with the kind of work that I do with clients and students and whether it's online or in real life, time, the boundaries of time, honoring each other's time, respecting and demanding that my own time be respected, not letting sessions just kind of like drag on past the time when they're supposed to be over. When that happens, I find myself recoiling from, it's like I find myself recoiling from the investment, and that investment, that presence is absolutely necessary to do the work that I want to do. It's absolutely the foundation, that empathy and that willingness to kind of to resonate, to open my heart, to invite their heart to be open, and to be in a space of holding that kind of presence together. That's what I do. That's what my work is all about, whether it's on the piano, whether it's in creative coaching, whatever. And so when Brené Brown described how you can't be fully present and empathetic to another person if your boundaries are being violated, I was like, oh my God, that's so true. That's so true. The instant that kicks over for me, and I feel like something, that either the time's not being honored, or even if it's on my end, if I don't honor, if I show up late to a session, for example, which happens pretty rarely, but all of a sudden I'm out of empathy. All of a sudden I'm not in a place where I can relate deeply, because I show up with the impulse to defend myself and to prove myself. I've showed up late, so now I'm on the back foot, because why didn't I honor the other person's time? Why wasn't I there on time? So then I start compensating for that. So then that in that compensating, in that desire to compensate, the space gets tinged with a different energy that has nothing to do with what's really there and what's really happening between the two people. It's an interrupter of that connection. So all that is to say that this idea of story stewardship and not sharing my heart, not allowing someone into my heart unless they've kind of proven that they're going to take care of it. That's another issue that I can look at in my life and say, wow, I've kind of done that a lot. Like stepped out and offered myself to people knowing in a way that they weren't really going to meet me in a place of genuine care and genuine respect, but just overlooking that. And so then I not only do I not share my story fully because part of me knows to hedge in these circumstances, but even when I do share my story fully, it feels like there's a violation. I feel kind of violated. And so anyway, this is just one of these concepts that she illuminated, and I can see by where I am in the post now. I'm only going to get to one of them today, but there's a couple of them in there. There's a handful that were really, really powerful. And I'm certainly going to do another post on these because they really help me frame empathy and relationship in a very helpful way, in a way that's actually really gives me clarity in some areas that feels useful. Feels like I can take this idea of story, this notion of story stewardship it's going to affect how I listen, and it's going to affect how I speak. It's going to really, we're going up to Crystal Lake and we're having a bunch of family events this week and weekend, and I'm hosting a storytelling event of all things. So talk about timely input about what it means to really steward our stories. So yeah, that's where I landed today, folks. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. I appreciate you. Love you. I'll see you tomorrow.